The world outside is entirely white, blanketed in a heavy, unending snowfall that descends from a sky the color of crushed slate. We are far in the north, in a time when the turning of the seasons dictates the rhythm of every waking moment. It is the heart of winter, the deep, slumbering center of the year, where the sun barely graces the horizon before dipping away again, leaving the landscape wrapped in long, peaceful twilights and endless, star-studded nights. The fjord is frozen solid, a vast expanse of pale ice that hums gently in the absolute cold. But here, within the stout wooden walls of the settlement, there is an enduring, quiet safety. The winds may howl around the steep, turf-covered roofs of the longhouses, but they cannot penetrate the thick layers of earth and ancient timber. You stand just inside the heavy oak door of your dwelling, wrapped in layers of thick, undyed wool and a heavy cloak of sheepskin that holds the warmth of the hearth fire. The air in the entryway is a perfect transition between the roasting heat of the central fire pit behind you and the crisp, biting frost of the world outside. You pull your thick, woven mittens higher up your wrists, feeling the rough, reassuring texture of the yarn against your skin. Today is a day for quiet work, for the deeply satisfying, monotonous task of taking inventory. It is time to organize the winter food storage room, a detached timber structure sitting just a few dozen paces from the main hall. You push the door open. The iron hinges, thick and black, let out a low, slow groan that is immediately swallowed by the falling snow. Stepping out, your leather boots meet the pristine powder with a deep, satisfying crunch. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The sound is muffled, isolated in the still air. Each step leaves a perfect, shadowed impression in the deep snow. The air you breathe in is startlingly cold, tasting of pine needles and pure, frozen water, and it leaves your lips in a plume of thick white steam that dissipates slowly into the gray light. The walk to the storehouse is short, but it emphasizes the profound isolation of the winter. There are no birds singing, no sounds of chopping wood or shouting voices. There is only the rhythmic, hypnotic sound of your own footsteps, the gentle rustle of your heavy woolen trousers brushing against one another, and the faint, whispering hiss of snowflakes landing on the leather of your cloak. You reach the storehouse, a squat, exceptionally sturdy building made of massive, overlapping logs of local pine. The gaps between the logs have been meticulously packed with dried moss and clay, sealing the interior completely from the punishing drafts. The roof is a thick mat of dormant, snow-covered turf, providing a heavy lid of insulation over the precious provisions housed within. Your mittened hand reaches out to grasp the iron ring that serves as the door handle. The metal is freezing, biting through the thick wool for just a fraction of a second before the heat of your hand warms it. You press your shoulder against the heavy, adze-hewn planks of the door and push. It yields with a slow, heavy scrape, the bottom edge brushing against a small drift of snow that has accumulated on the threshold. You step inside, pulling the heavy door shut behind you. The click of the wooden latch falling into place seals you inside a world of absolute, undisturbed quiet. The air in the storeroom is significantly colder than the longhouse, yet it lacks the biting wind of the outdoors. It is a still, preserving cold, carefully maintained to keep the stores fresh through the long months until the spring thaw. Before you can begin your work, you must bring light to the shadows. From a small leather pouch at your belt, you retrieve a piece of flint and a forged iron striker. You take a small, shallow soapstone bowl resting on a ledge near the door, a lamp filled with solidified tallow and a wick of dried bog cotton. With slow, methodical movements, you strike the flint. The sharp clack echoes softly in the small room. A spark flies, landing on a pinch of charred linen tinder. You blow on it gently, a long, steady breath, watching the tiny red ember crawl across the fabric. Slowly, you transfer the ember to the wick of the tallow lamp. The flame catches. It begins small, a tiny blue teardrop, before finding the rendered fat and blossoming into a warm, golden, flickering light. The smell of the burning tallow rises, a rich, earthy scent that mixes intimately with the complex aromas already present in the room. As the warm light pushes back the gloom, the magnificent order of the storehouse is revealed. The smells here are a tapestry of survival and preparation. There is the sharp, smoky tang of cured meats hanging from the rafters, the deep, briny scent of salted fish packed tightly in wooden casks, the dusty, dry aroma of oats and barley stored in massive linen sacks, and the faint, sweet smell of dried apples and elderberries strung on thin cords. It is the smell of security, of a harvest successfully gathered and preserved. It is profoundly calming. You hold the soapstone lamp up, letting its gentle glow wash over the wooden shelves that line the walls. The wood of the shelves is old and smooth, polished by years of sliding barrels and shifting sacks. You walk slowly toward the first section, your boots making soft, dull thuds on the packed earth floor. Here, in the corner, sit the large, iron-hooped barrels of salted cod. You set the lamp down on a sturdy block of wood nearby and pull off your heavy right mitten, tucking it into your belt. Your bare hand reaches out to touch the lid of the first barrel. The wood is freezing, the grain raised slightly from the moisture in the air. You trace the curve of the iron hoop, feeling the cold, rough surface of the forged metal, noting a small patch of powdery rust near a rivet. With both hands, you grip the edges of the heavy, circular wooden lid and lift it carefully. It shifts with a soft wooden scrape. You set the lid aside, leaning it gently against the wall. Inside the barrel, resting in a bed of coarse, gray sea salt, are layers upon layers of split, dried cod. They are stiff as boards, their silvery skin dulled by the heavy salt cure. You run a finger over the top layer, feeling the gritty, crystalline texture of the salt and the hard, ridged surface of the preserved fish. Your task is simple and utterly unhurried. You are here to ensure that none of the stores have drawn dampness, to count the barrels, and to tidy the alignment of the provisions. You begin to slowly, methodically shift the top few fish, checking the layers beneath. The sound of the dried fish scraping against one another is dry and papery, accompanied by the faint, sandy whisper of shifting salt. You pick up one of the rigid cod, feeling its surprising weight and the rough texture of the salt against your palm. You inspect it in the golden light of the tallow lamp, turning it slowly. It is perfectly cured, dry and hard, completely safe from the damp. You place the fish back into the barrel, pressing it down firmly into the salt. You repeat this process with the next fish and the next, your movements slow, repetitive, and deeply rhythmic. Lift, inspect, replace. Lift, inspect, replace. The monotony of the task is a balm to the mind. There is nothing else to worry about, no distant raids, no harsh weather to fight. There is only the quiet storeroom, the flickering golden light, the smell of salt and smoke, and the endless, comforting repetition of ensuring your home is provided for. You carefully replace the wooden lid on the first barrel, making sure it sits perfectly flush with the rim to keep the air out. You run your hand around the circumference, feeling the smooth joint where the lid meets the staves. Satisfied, you move to the second barrel in the row. You grip the edges of the lid, lift it with a soft scrape, and lean it against the wall. The bed of salt inside is undisturbed, perfectly flat. You begin the process again. Lift the fish. Inspect the cure. Replace the fish. The shadows cast by the small tallow lamp dance lazily on the rough-hewn logs of the walls. Outside, the snow continues to fall in absolute silence, piling higher against the sturdy timber walls of the storehouse. Inside, it is just you, the steady rhythm of your breathing, the dry rustle of salted fish, and the profound, peaceful boredom of winter preparation. Every movement is deliberate, every breath slow and measured, as you work your way through the quiet, fragrant gloom of the Viking winter stores. You slide the heavy, circular oak lid back onto the second barrel of salted cod. It meets the rim with a dull, hollow thud that reverberates ever so slightly in the small, enclosed space of the storehouse. The wood-on-wood sound is muted by the dense, cold air. You run your bare hands over the flat surface of the lid, feeling the rough grain of the old timber, ensuring it sits perfectly flush. It must be a tight seal. In the deep winter, the cold is your ally, preserving the food, but any dampness from the air must be kept at bay. Satisfied with the placement, you move slowly to the next barrel in the row. This third barrel is slightly smaller, its iron hoops thicker and closer together. You grip the edges of the lid, your fingers finding the familiar, shallow grooves carved into the underside to aid in lifting. With a slow, steady exertion of force, you pull the lid up and away. A different scent rises to greet you, distinct from the cod. This is the sharp, deeply pungent aroma of salted herring. It is a rich, oily smell, complex and profoundly savory, speaking of the cold, dark waters of the autumn sea. You lean the lid against the massive, adze-hewn logs of the wall, the edge of the wood scraping softly against the dried moss packed between the timbers. You look down into the barrel. The herring are packed in incredibly tight, concentric circles, layered one upon the other in a glistening, silver-gray mosaic. The coarse sea salt has drawn the moisture from them, leaving them firm and solid, yet they retain a slight sheen in the golden, flickering light of the tallow lamp. You reach out, your fingertips brushing the topmost layer. The texture is rough from the salt crystals, yet surprisingly smooth where the skin of the fish is exposed. It is a dry, secure feeling. There is no sliminess, no give to the flesh. They are perfectly cured. You spend several long minutes simply standing there, staring down into the barrel, mesmerized by the intricate pattern of the packed fish and the tiny, sparkling reflections of the lamp flame catching on the larger grains of salt. The absolute silence of the storehouse wraps around you like a heavy, comforting woolen blanket. Outside, you know the snow is still falling, burying the settlement deeper in a world of white. But in here, time seems to have slowed to a near standstill. There is only the slow, rhythmic rise and fall of your chest beneath your heavy layers of wool, and the faint, sweet smell of the burning tallow wick. Eventually, you lift the lid from its resting place against the wall. You guide it carefully back over the opening of the herring barrel, lowering it with agonizing slowness until it settles into place with a soft, definitive clack. You repeat this entire unhurried process with the fourth and final barrel in the row. Lift the lid. Smell the rich, oily brine. Inspect the tight, crystalline layers of preserved fish. Replace the lid. Ensure the seal. The repetition is not a chore, it is a meditation. Each movement is a reaffirmation of your survival, a physical checking off of the days that separate you from the distant spring thaw. Having finished with the salted fish, you step back. Your hands are covered in a fine, grayish dust of dried salt and fish scales. You turn toward a sturdy wooden peg driven deep into one of the wall logs near the door. Hanging from it is a square of coarse, unbleached linen, meant specifically for this purpose. You walk over to it, your leather boots making that same muffled, rhythmic crunch thud against the hard-packed earth floor. You pull the rag from the peg. The fabric is stiff with cold and past use. It is a heavy, rudimentary weave, the threads thick and uneven, the color of dried oatmeal. You begin to wipe your hands. You press the rough cloth against your palms, rubbing slowly and deliberately. The friction generates a tiny, almost imperceptible warmth against your chilled skin. The sound of the coarse linen dragging over your hands is a dry, scratchy whisper. Scritch, scrape, scritch. You rub the rag between your fingers, dislodging the salt crystals, feeling them fall away in an invisible shower to the dirt floor below. You take your time, ensuring every grain of salt is removed, before folding the rag neatly in half and hanging it back over the smooth wooden peg. It is time to inspect the grain. You turn back to the small soapstone lamp resting on the wooden block. You cup your hands gently around the small flame to protect it as you lift the heavy stone bowl. The tallow has melted into a small, clear pool of liquid fat directly beneath the burning wick, while the edges remain a solid, opaque white. As you lift the lamp, the golden light shifts dynamically around the room. The deep, heavy shadows cast by the barrels and hanging hams stretch and contort, dancing across the rough-hewn ceiling timbers and the moss-chinked walls. You walk slowly toward the back of the storehouse, the pool of warm light following you, illuminating the dusty, earthen floor beneath your feet. Here, elevated on low pallets made of split pine logs to keep them away from the ground's chill, sit the massive sacks of grain. They are slumped heavily against one another, looking like a row of exhausted, overworked men resting against the wall. There are 6 sacks in total, each holding a fortune in oats and barley. The sacks are made of a dense, heavy linen, tightly woven to prevent even the smallest grain from escaping, and to present a formidable barrier to any enterprising field mouse. You set the soapstone lamp down carefully on the edge of one of the split log pallets, ensuring it is completely stable. You approach the first sack, a towering mound of pale, dusty fabric. It holds barley, the foundation of the winter stews and the flatbreads baked on the hearth stones. You reach out and grasp the thick leather thong that binds the neck of the sack tightly shut. The leather is a dark, rich brown, stiff and unyielding from the freezing air. It takes a moment of focused, deliberate pressure from your cold thumbs to begin loosening the knot. You work slowly, feeling the rigid leather resist and then, gradually, microscopically, yield. The knot slips. You pull the long tail of the thong, unwinding it slowly from the gathered fabric. The sound of the stiff leather dragging against the coarse linen is a dry, rasping hiss that seems amplified in the absolute, cavernous quiet of the room. Once the thong is completely removed, you lay it carefully across your knee. You reach out with both hands and begin to peel back the heavy, gathered folds of the linen neck. The fabric is thick and stiff, holding its creased shape for a moment before falling open. As the neck of the sack widens, the smell of the barley rises to meet you in the cold air. It is a profoundly dry, dusty, deeply comforting smell. It smells of the late summer sun baking the earth, of dry chaff, and the rhythmic, sweeping sound of the scythe in the fields. It is the scent of pure sustenance, captured and dormant in the freezing dark. You plunge your bare right hand deep into the open sack. The barley is incredibly cold, having thoroughly absorbed the ambient temperature of the storehouse. It feels like pushing your hand into a deep pool of icy, dry pebbles. The grains part smoothly, effortlessly around your fingers, flowing over your skin and creating a soft, shifting sound. It is a gentle, continuous sh-ch-ch-ch-ch-ch-ch-ch, like the sound of miniature rain falling on very dry leaves. You push your hand deeper, past your wrist, feeling the heavy, comforting, compressive weight of the grain pressing in on all sides of your hand and forearm. You close your hand into a fist, capturing a handful of the grain and slowly draw it up. You hold your hand under the golden light of the tallow lamp and slowly open your fingers. The barley grains are hard, pale, and perfectly dry. Each grain is slightly ridged, with a tiny, sharp point at one end. They look like tiny, polished wooden beads in the flickering light. You tilt your hand, letting the grain cascade slowly back into the sack. It falls in a steady, hypnotic stream, the grains clinking against one another with a delicate, dry rustle. You repeat this motion 3 times, plunge the hand in, lift a handful, let it slowly sift back down. You are checking for any sign of dampness, any slight clumping that might suggest moisture has breached the linen. But there is nothing. The grain is loose, dry, and perfectly safe. With a deep sigh of satisfaction that plumes in a cloud of white vapor before your face, you begin to gather the thick linen folds of the sack's neck back together. You pleat the stiff fabric carefully, ensuring it is gathered tightly and evenly, leaving no gaps. You pick up the stiff leather thong and wrap it around the neck once, twice, pulling it as taut as your cold hands will allow. You tie a complex, secure knot, pulling the loops tight with a final, firm tug. The sack is secure once more. You step sideways to the next sack, this one containing oats. You repeat the slow, methodical process. You untie the stiff leather binding, listening to the dry rasp of leather on linen. You peel back the heavy folds of fabric. The smell here is slightly different, still dusty and dry, but with a sweeter, more grassy note. You plunge your hand into the oats. The texture is distinctly different from the barley. The oats are flatter, lighter, and smoother. As you sift them through your fingers, the sound is softer, more like the whispering rustle of dry paper than the clinking rain of the barley. You lift a handful, inspect the pale, flat grains in the golden light, and let them cascade back down. Dry, perfect, safe. You meticulously gather the neck of the sack and bind it tight with the leather thong. You stand back, looking at the row of neatly tied sacks sitting squarely on their wooden pallets. The profound monotony of the task has settled over you, calming your mind completely. There are no thoughts of the future, no worries about the deep snow outside. There is only the immediate reality of the cold, dry air, the smell of grain, and the warm, golden pool of light cast by the tallow lamp. You notice a very small scattering of dust and perhaps a dozen stray grains of barley that have fallen onto the packed earth floor near the pallets. It is a tiny, almost insignificant mess, but in a space governed by such strict order, it demands attention. In the far corner of the room, leaning against the wall, is a small hand broom. You walk over to it slowly. It is a simple, rustic tool, made of a bundle of thin, flexible birch twigs bound tightly together with rough hemp twine around a short handle of smoothed ash wood. You grasp the handle. The wood is cold but polished to a soft sheen by years of use. You carry the small broom back to the grain sacks. You bend down, the heavy wool of your trousers pulling slightly at the knees. You begin to sweep the small scattering of dust and grain into a neat, tiny pile. The birch twigs scratch against the hard-packed dirt floor with a highly rhythmic, hypnotic sound. Scritch, scritch, scritch. The motion is incredibly slow, deliberate, and entirely focused on this one minuscule task. You sweep the few grains together, the sound of the twigs loud in the absolute silence of the storehouse. It is a repetitive, comforting noise, a sound of domestic maintenance and careful stewardship. You gather the tiny pile, satisfied that the floor is once again perfectly clean, perfectly ordered, and completely still. The small hand broom is returned to its corner, leaning once more against the rough timber wall. You stand in the center of the storehouse for a long moment, your hands resting at your sides, just watching the way the golden light of the tallow lamp plays across the room. The silence here is not empty. It is a thick, heavy presence, a silence made of layers of cold wood, packed earth, and the dormant energy of the food supplies. It is a weightless pressure against your ears, broken only by the very faint, rhythmic sound of your own heartbeat and the occasional, tiny pop from the burning wick of the lamp. You turn your gaze upward, away from the earthen floor and the low pallets, toward the high, smoke-stained rafters of the storage room. The ceiling is a dark, intricate web of heavy beams and cross struts, hewn from the hearts of ancient pines. In the flickering light, the wood appears almost like polished obsidian, darkened by years of wood smoke that has drifted in from the main longhouse and the deliberate smoking of the meats housed here. Hanging from these beams, suspended by thick, hand-twisted loops of hempen rope and iron hooks, are the cured meats. This is the heart of the winter's protein, the dense, saltan smoke-preserved energy that will sustain the household through the darkest cycles of the year. You lift the soapstone lamp higher, extending your arm until the muscles in your shoulder feel a dull, pleasant ache. The light reaches upward, illuminating the first of the hanging treasures, a massive side of smoked pork, a ham that has been curing since the late autumn. It hangs motionless, a dark, heavy shape against the shadows. You move closer, your boots whispering against the ground until you are standing directly beneath it. The scent here is overwhelming and deeply comforting. It is a concentrated essence of hardwood smoke, oak and applewood, mingled with the sharp, crystalline tang of salt and the deep, rich smell of rendered fat. You reach up with your bare hand. Your fingers brush against the surface of the ham, It is cold, remarkably so, and the surface is hard, almost like stone. The outer layer is a dark mahogany brown, textured with a fine, dry coating of soot and salt. You run your fingertips slowly across the width of the meat. The texture is uneven. There are ridges where the muscle has tightened during the curing process and smooth, slightly waxy patches where the fat has been pressed into a protective layer. You can feel the tiny grains of salt that have not yet fully dissolved, a gritty, mineral sensation against your skin. Your hand moves upward to the rope that holds the ham aloft. The rope is a masterpiece of simple utility, thick three-strand hemp dyed a dark gray by the smoke. It is rough and prickly, the fibers standing out like tiny frozen needles. You grasp the rope gently, feeling its incredible strength and the way it has bitten into the hook above. You give the ham a very slight, very slow push. It does not swing so much as it oscillates, a heavy, pendulous movement that is barely perceptible. The iron hook above lets out a tiny, high-pitched creak, a slow, metallic protest that sounds like a single note from a distant, frozen instrument. Creak. The sound hangs in the air, vibrating softly before fading back into the silence. You wait for it to stop, your eyes fixed on the dark shape of the meat. You are counting them now, mentally checking them off against the list in your mind. 1 large ham, 2 smaller shoulders, 4 long, flat slabs of bacon, their edges curled and blackened by the smoke. You move to the next hanging piece, a side of bacon that has been cured with a heavy hand of dried herbs. As you stand beneath the bacon, you can see the tiny, dried fragments of thyme and juniper berries embedded in the dark surface. You lean in closer, your nose just inches from the meat. The smell is more complex here. The base note of smoke is still there, but it is topped with the resinous, pine-like scent of the juniper and the faint, earthy ghost of the thyme. You close your eyes and breathe in deeply, letting the aroma fill your lungs. It is a smell that promises warmth, stews bubbling on the hearth, and the deep satisfaction of a belly full of rich, salty fat. It is the smell of safety. The bacon slabs hang in a neat, orderly row, perfectly spaced to allow the cold air to circulate around them. You walk down the row, your lamp casting long, swaying shadows that stretch across the ceiling and down the far wall. Each shadow is a ghost of the meat, a dark, elongated twin that follows your every movement. You touch each slab in turn, a brief, respectful contact of cold skin against cold, cured protein. The repetition of the movement, step, lift lamp, touch, observe, creates a hypnotic rhythm that further slows your pulse. You are a guardian of this space, a steward of the winter's life force, and the responsibility is as heavy and as calming as the stones of the fjord. Near the back corner, tucked away in the deepest shadows where the cold is most consistent, hang the strings of sausages. They are draped over a horizontal pole like dark, heavy garlands. Each sausage is small, the size of a man's thumb, bound together with thin, twisted linen thread. They have been dried until they are as hard as wood, their casings wrinkled and dark. You reach out and let your hand trail along the length of the string. The sausages click against one another with a dry, hollow sound, like the clattering of small bones or the rattling of dry seeds in a gourd. Click-clack, click-clack. It is a delicate, brittle sound that seems to emphasize the absolute stillness of the room. You spend a long time here, simply observing the sausages, the way the light catches the oily sheen on their surfaces, the way the linen threads have been knotted with such precision. There is a profound beauty in this level of preparation, in the knowledge that every one of these small, hard cylinders represents a meal, a moment of sustenance in the face of the freezing void outside. You find yourself focusing on a single knot in the linen thread. It is a simple overhand knot, pulled tight and trimmed short. You trace the shape of the knot with your eyes, following the path of the thread as it wraps around itself, over and over, until it becomes a solid, immutable point of connection. Your arm is beginning to feel heavy from holding the soapstone lamp aloft. You slowly lower it, watching the shadows of the rafters climb back up the walls and retreat into the darkness of the ceiling. You turn away from the hanging meats, your boots making that familiar, grounding thump on the earthen floor. Your next task lies below, in the large, rectangular wooden bins that sit along the northern wall, furthest from the door. These bins are made of thick planks of larch, a wood known for its resistance to rot. They are filled nearly to the brim with fine, dry river sand. This sand is the secret to the preservation of the root vegetables, the carrots, the parsnips, and the leeks that were pulled from the earth just before the first hard frost. The sand mimics the cool, dark embrace of the soil, keeping the vegetables dormant and crisp, preventing them from shriveling or sprouting prematurely. You walk to the first bin and set your lamp down on the wide, flat rim of the wooden frame. The sand within is a pale, silvery gray in the golden light. It looks like a miniature desert, perfectly flat and undisturbed. You reach out and press your hand onto the surface of the sand. It is shockingly cold, a deep mineral chill that seems to sink straight into your bones. The sand is dry on the very top, but as you press down, you feel a hint of the moisture held within the lower layers. You begin to move your hand in a slow, circular motion, smoothing out a small area of the sand. The sound of the grains rubbing against one another is a soft, continuous hiss, a microscopic version of the wind blowing across the frozen fjord. It is a gritty, tactile sensation that is both abrasive and strangely soothing. You decide to check on the condition of the parsnips. You plunge your hand into the sand. Unlike the grain, which flowed like water, the sand offers a dense, heavy resistance. It packs around your fingers, filling the spaces between them with a cold, unyielding weight. You dig deeper, your hand disappearing beneath the silver-gray surface. You feel the sand sliding up your wrist and under the cuff of your woolen tunic. The sensation is sharp and invigorating against your skin. About 6 inches down, your fingertips encounter something solid and tapered. It is a parsnip buried vertically in its sandy bed. You wrap your fingers around the root. It feels firm and plump, the skin slightly rough but without any soft spots. You begin to pull it upward, a slow, steady extraction. The sand clings to the root, creating a heavy drag. As the parsnip breaks the surface, it brings a small cascade of sand with it, the grains sliding off the pale, cream-colored skin in a rhythmic, whispering shower. You hold the parsnip up to the light of the lamp. It is a beautiful thing, long, slightly twisted, the color of old ivory. A few fine, hair-like rootlets still cling to its sides, dusted with the fine gray sand. You run your thumb over the skin, brushing away the remaining grains. The skin is smooth and cool, smelling faintly of the deep, dark earth and a sharp, peppery sweetness. It is perfectly preserved, as fresh as the day it was harvested. You hold the parsnip for a long time, feeling its weight in your hand, its coldness seeping into your palm. There is no hurry. There is no reason to rush this inspection. You turn the root over, examining the top where the greens were once attached. The cut is clean and dry, a small, circular scar of hardened tissue. Everything is as it should be. The sand is doing its work, holding the life of the garden in a state of suspended animation. With the same slow, deliberate care, you begin to rebury the parsnip. You push it back into the hole you made, feeling the sand pack tightly around it once more. You use your palm to smooth the surface of the sand, erasing the evidence of your intrusion. You move your hand back and forth, until the sand is once again a flat, featureless plane of silver gray. The sound of your hand sliding over the sand is the only thing in the world. A soft, rhythmic that perfectly matches the slow pace of your breathing. You move to the next bin, which holds the carrots. You repeat the process, the slow plunge of the hand, the cold resistance of the sand, the discovery of the firm, orange root, the inspection in the golden light, and the careful, rhythmic reburial. Each movement is a duplicate of the one before, a loop of domestic care that stretches time until the minutes feel like hours, and the hours feel like a single, unbroken moment of peace. The cold of the storeroom is starting to settle into your shoulders now, a gentle, insistent reminder of the world outside. But you do not feel the need to leave. You are wrapped in the scent of smoke, salt, and earth. You are surrounded by the abundance of the harvest, the physical manifestation of your hard work and foresight. In this quiet, frozen room, the winter is not an enemy to be feared, but a season to be respected, a time for the world to rest, and for you to find a profound, hypnotic satisfaction in the simplest of tasks. You stand by the sand bins, your hand resting on the cold wood, and watch the tiny flame of your lamp dance in the still, preserving air. The golden light of your tallow lamp continues to burn with a steady, unhurried flame, casting a warm glow that seems to push back against the ancient, deep-seated cold of the storage room. Having tended to the grains and the root vegetables, you turn your attention toward the back wall, where the storage room meets the natural slope of the earth. Here, the temperature is at its most constant, a stable, preserving chill that is ideal for the liquids that will provide both hydration and a much-needed sense of celebration during the long winter nights. You move slowly, your footsteps heavy and rhythmic on the earthen floor, making your way toward the row of massive, belly-shaped barrels that house the ale and the mead. These barrels are the largest objects in the room, standing as tall as a man's waist and twice as wide. They are crafted from heart oak, the staves thick and slightly curved, bound together by massive hoops of hand-forged iron. You approach the first barrel, which contains the common ale, the daily sustenance of the household. The wood is dark, almost black in the dim light, and you can see the marks of the cooper's adze where the surface was smoothed years ago. You reach out a hand and rest it on the top of the barrel. The wood is freezing, a solid, unyielding cold that seems to vibrate with the weight of the liquid inside. You begin a slow, methodical inspection of the barrel's exterior. Your fingers trace the line of the iron hoops, feeling the rough texture of the metal and the small, rounded heads of the rivets that hold them in place. You move your hand slowly around the circumference, feeling for any sign of moisture, any tiny weep of liquid through the seams of the oak staves. The wood is dry and tight, the fibers having swelled with the ale to create a perfect, airtight seal. You can feel the strength of the construction, the way the iron and the oak work together to contain the pressure of the fermentation. You take your knuckles and tap the side of the barrel near the top. The sound is a dull, solid thud, a heavy resonance that speaks of a full vessel. You move your hand down a few inches and tap again. Thud. The sound is identical. You continue this downward progression, tapping every few inches, listening to the subtle changes in the pitch of the wood. As you reach the midpoint of the barrel, the sound remains deep and full. It is a comforting, hypnotic noise, a rhythmic measurement of your security. Thud, thud, thud. Each tap is a confirmation that the supply is intact, that the long winter ahead will not be a thirsty one. The scent around the ale barrels is heavy and deeply satisfying. It is a complex aroma of fermented malt, the earthy bitterness of dried bog myrtle, and the underlying sweetness of the grain. It is a smell that feels thick in the air, a caloric presence that promises warmth and energy. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the scent wash over you, visualizing the bubbling cauldrons where the mash was boiled and the slow, quiet transformation that took place in the darkness of the cellar. You move to the next barrel, this one containing the precious mead. This barrel is slightly smaller, and the oak is of a finer grain, polished to a soft sheen. Mead is the drink of the gods, a gift of the summer sun captured in the form of honey and transformed by time and the cold. You repeat the process of inspection, your movements even slower now, as if the value of the liquid demands a higher level of reverence. You trace the iron hoops, you feel the dry seams of the wood, and you begin the rhythmic tapping. The sound of the mead barrel is different, sharper, with a slightly higher resonance. The liquid inside is denser, more viscous, and the wood seems to sing with a clearer note. Tink, tink, thud. You find the level of the mead, noting that it is nearly to the brim. You imagine the golden liquid inside, thick and slow-moving, holding the essence of 1,000 summer flowers that bloomed in the meadows during the short, intense growing season. The thought is a warm one, a bright contrast to the frozen world outside the storehouse walls. Tucked between the large barrels are smaller stone jars, their mouths sealed with thick layers of beeswax. These jars contain the most concentrated treasures, the pure, unfermented honey and the oils pressed from seeds and nuts. You set your tallow lamp down on the flat head of an ale barrel, freeing both of your hands. You reach for one of the honey jars, a heavy, salt-glazed vessel with a deep blue hue. The jar is cold, the glaze smooth and glass-like under your fingertips. You lift it slowly, feeling its surprising heft. The honey inside is a solid weight, a dense core of sweetness. You bring the jar closer to your face and inspect the wax seal. The beeswax is a pale, creamy yellow, textured with the fine imprints of the cloth that was used to press it into place. You run your thumb over the seal, feeling the slight give of the wax, the way it has molded itself into every microscopic crevice of the jar's rim. It is a perfect, hermetic seal, protecting the honey from the damp and the cold. As you hold the jar, The warmth of your hands begins to soften the wax ever so slightly. A faint, incredibly sweet scent begins to rise, the smell of beeswax, mixed with the floral ghost of the honey within. It is a delicate, ephemeral aroma that cuts through the heavier sense of smoke and salt in the room. You find yourself staring at the wax, mesmerized by its pale, opaque surface and the way it catches the flickering light of the lamp. You spend several minutes in this state of quiet observation, the world outside forgotten, your entire universe shrunk down to the size of a stone jar, and the scent of ancient summer. You carefully replace the honey jar in its spot on the shelf, ensuring it sits squarely and securely. You then move to the jars of oil. These are smaller, made of a ruddier clay, their surfaces slightly oily to the touch. You check each seal in turn, your fingers moving with a practiced, automatic grace. The monotony of the task is profoundly calming, a series of small, manageable checks that build a sense of total control over your environment. In here, everything is in its place. Everything is preserved. Everything is safe. Next to the jars of oil hanging from a low beam are the bundles of dried herbs. These were gathered in the late summer and early autumn, tied with thin linen threads and hung here to dry in the still air. There is thyme with its tiny gray-green leaves, savory with its sharp, peppery scent, and mint, which still retains a hint of its cool, refreshing aroma. You reach out and brush your hand against a bundle of thyme. The sound is a dry, delicate crinkle, 1,000 tiny leaves rubbing together like the rustle of a silken robe. Crinkle, rustle, whisper. A few tiny fragments of leaf break away and flutter down to the floor, their descent silent and graceful. The scent of the thyme is released into the air, a sharp, earthy fragrance that reminds you of the rocky hillsides and the warm sun. You take a deep breath, letting the herbal scent clear your senses. The herbs are dry, brittle, and perfectly preserved, ready to be crumbled into the winter stews or steeped in hot water to chase away the chill of a long night. You spend a long time with the herbs, moving from bundle to bundle, touching them lightly, listening to their dry whispers and breathing in their fading scents. Each herb has its own story, its own connection to the earth and the sun. In the silence of the storehouse, these stories feel tangible, a living history of the year that has passed. You are the keeper of this history, the one who ensures that the gifts of the summer are not lost to the winter's bite. The cold is starting to seep through your sheepskin cloak now, a steady, insistent pressure against your skin. You look back at the row of ale and mead barrels, the stone jars of honey and oil, and the hanging bundles of herbs. They represent the liquid life of the household, the flavors and the sustenance that will keep the spirit alive when the body is weary of the cold and the dark. You feel a profound sense of satisfaction, a deep, quiet pride in the order and the abundance of your stores. You pick up your tallow lamp, the soapstone bowl warm against your palm. The flame is still steady, a small, defiant light in the vast, cold silence. You begin to move back toward the center of the room, your path illuminated by the golden glow. The shadows of the barrels and the jars stretch out before you, long and graceful, dancing on the earthen floor and the rough timber walls. Every step you take is slow and deliberate, a rhythmic continuation of the day's quiet work. You stop for a moment by the grain sacks, looking at the neat, tied necks and the swept floor. You look up at the hanging meats, the dark, heavy shapes of the hams and the sausages. You look over at the bins of sand where the root vegetables sleep in their cold, dry beds. The storehouse is a temple of survival, a monument to the foresight and the labor of the community. And you are its silent guardian, moving through the shadows with a steady hand and a calm heart. The silence of the room seems to deepen, a thick, velvety quiet that wraps around you like a cocoon. Outside, the snow is still falling, a silent white weight that is burying the world. But in here there is no weight, only the lightness of being prepared, the ease of a task well done. You stand in the center of the room, the tallow lamp held low, and simply breathe. The air is cold, dry, and filled with the sense of a successful harvest. It is the most beautiful, most boring, most comforting place in the world. You are ready for the winter. You are ready for the sleep that follows the work. The light from your small soapstone lamp flickers gently, its golden aura expanding and contracting like the steady breathing of a sleeping giant. You have spent what feels like hours in the quiet company of the grains, the cured meats, and the heavy barrels of ale. Yet the air in the storehouse remains perfectly still, as if the room itself is holding its breath to preserve the precious life within. The deep, heavy cold of the Scandinavian winter is a constant companion here, but it is a dry, clean cold that feels more like a protective shield than a biting enemy. You turn your body slowly, the heavy wool of your cloak rustling with a soft, melodic friction, and move toward the low, thick-timbered shelves that occupy the coolest corner of the room, furthest from the entry and closest to the frost-hardened earth. This is the sanctuary of the dairy and the preserved fruits, a place where the bounty of the summer pastures and the wild forest floors is kept in a state of suspended animation. The shelves here are made of massive slabs of split oak, their surfaces left rough and unpolished, yet worn smooth in patches by the repeated placement and removal of heavy ceramic vessels. You approach the first shelf, lowering your lamp so that the light washes over a row of squat, wide-mouthed crocks. These are the butter jars. Each one is a masterpiece of functional pottery, fired in the village kilns until the clay turned a deep, earthy red, then coated in a thick, salt glaze that reflects the lamp light in a series of soft, watery highlights. You reach out your hand, your fingers feeling the temperature of the air drop as they descend toward the shelf. You touch the side of the first crock. The glaze is incredibly smooth, possessing a mineral chill that feels like touching the surface of a frozen pond. You run your hand around the circumference of the jar, feeling the slight irregularities in the hand-thrown clay, the subtle ridges left by the potter's thumbs as the wheel spun in the summer sun. You grasp the heavy wooden lid of the crock. It is made of a dense, dark wood, perhaps plum or cherry, and has been carved to fit the mouth of the jar with exacting precision. You lift it slowly. There is a faint, momentary resistance, a tiny hiss of air as the seal is broken. The sound is delicate and brief, like the sigh of a small animal. You set the lid down on the oak shelf with a soft, hollow tock. Inside the crock, the butter is packed tight, its surface leveled and covered with a thin, glistening layer of heavy brine and coarse salt crystals. This is the summer butter, churned when the cows were grazing on the high, flower-rich mountain grasses, and its color is a deep, rich primrose yellow, even in the dim light. The scent that rises from the jar is wonderful, a concentrated essence of sweet cream, clover, and a sharp, clean tang of salt. It is a dense, heavy aroma that speaks of prosperity and the quiet, rhythmic labor of the dairy maids. You take a small, flat wooden paddle that hangs from a leather loop on the side of the shelf. The paddle is made of ash, its grain fine and straight. You use the edge of the paddle to gently press down on the surface of the butter, ensuring that the brine covers every square inch. The sound of the wood moving through the salt water is a soft, wet slosh, a rhythmic swish-up that is infinitely peaceful. You are not searching for flaws. You are merely confirming the integrity of the preservation. You watch as a few grains of gray sea salt swirl in the brine, dancing in the golden light of your lamp before settling back onto the yellow surface of the butter. Satisfied, you replace the wooden lid. You align it perfectly with the rim, feeling the weight of the wood settle into the grooves of the ceramic. You move to the next jar and the next, repeating this slow, methodical ritual. Each crock is a world unto itself, a captured moment of the year's height, held safely in the dark and the cold. The repetition of the movement, lift, inspect, press, replace, serves to further anchor you in the present moment, stripping away any lingering thoughts of the world beyond these four walls. Next to the butter crocks are the cheese wheels. These are not stored in jars but are stacked directly on the oak planks, separated by layers of clean, dry straw and thin sheets of unbleached linen. There are 12 wheels in total, each the size of a large loaf of bread, their rinds rubbed with salt and herbs until they have become as tough as leather. You reach out and touch the top wheel in the stack. The linen wrapping is cold and slightly stiff, the weave of the fabric imprinted into your fingertips. You peel back a corner of the cloth, the sound of the fibers pulling apart a dry, textured whisper. Scritch, scritch. Beneath the cloth, the cheese rind is a beautiful mottled gray and tan, smelling faintly of the earth and the deep, musky scent of aging milk. You press your thumb into the side of the wheel. It is firm, with just the slightest hint of give, indicating that the center is still supple. You decide to turn the wheel, a task that must be done regularly to ensure the moisture remains evenly distributed. You slide both hands under the heavy disc of cheese, feeling its substantial weight and the rough texture of the rind. You lift it slowly, an inch off the shelf, and flip it over in one smooth, continuous motion. As the cheese meets the straw bedding on its other side, it makes a soft, muffled thump, and the straw rustles in response, a dry, brittle sound like the scurrying of a tiny mouse. You smooth the linen back over the top, your palms flat against the cloth, erasing the wrinkles with a slow, sweeping motion. Shhhhhshhhh. You move down the line, turning each wheel with the same reverent care, the scent of the aging dairy growing stronger and more comforting with every movement. Beyond the cheeses, the shelves hold the smaller, more delicate treasures, the jars of preserved berries. These are tall, slender vessels made of translucent horn and dark wood, their tops bound with circles of soft leather and sinew. You pick up a jar of lingonberries, the light of your lamp passing through the horn walls and illuminating the contents in a soft, ruby-red glow. The berries are suspended in a thick syrup of honey and their own juices, looking like tiny, captured embers. You hold the jar up to your eyes, watching the way the syrup moves with an agonizing slowness as you tilt the vessel. It is a viscous, hypnotic motion, the berries tumbling over one another in a silent, crimson ballet. There is something deeply reassuring about the sight of this fruit, gathered from the sun-dappled floors of the pine forests, now sitting safely in the heart of the winter. It is a promise of sweetness in a season of salt and smoke. You run your fingers over the leather binding at the top, feeling the texture of the grain and the tightness of the sinew cord. Everything is secure. Everything is as it should be. You spend a long time with the berry jars, arranging them by type. The sharp red lingonberries, the rare golden cloudberries from the bogs, and the deep midnight blue of the dried bilberries. You move them one by one, their bases clicking softly against the oak shelves. Clink, clink, clink. The sound is musical and precise, a small domestic symphony played out in the near darkness. You find yourself focusing on the labels you have carved into the wooden bases of the jars, simple runes and symbols that tell the story of where and when the fruit was found. You trace the grooves of the carvings with your fingernail, the sound a tiny, sharp tick-tick-tick that echoes in the stillness. The cold of the lower shelves has begun to numb your fingertips, a dull, creeping sensation that makes every touch feel more deliberate and significant. You don't mind the cold. It is the very thing that makes this room a sanctuary. It is the silence that allows the food to rest and the darkness that keeps it pure. You take a step back, the straw on the floor crunching under your boots, and survey the dairy corner. The rows of crocks and the stacks of cheese wheels look like a miniature city, a bastion of civilization carved out of the wilderness. You notice a small, errant piece of straw that has found its way onto the top of a butter jar. You reach out and pick it up, the dry stalk snapping between your fingers with a tiny, brittle sound. You hold the fragment of straw in the lamp light, admiring its golden color and the way it still holds the memory of the sun. You let it fall to the floor, watching its spiraling descent until it vanishes into the shadows. Your task in this corner is complete. The butter is protected, the cheese is turned, and the berries are accounted for. The order of the storehouse has been maintained, and the sense of peace that permeates the room has settled deep into your own bones. You feel a slow, heavy wave of tiredness wash over you, not the sharp exhaustion of a day's hard labor, but the soft, fuzzy drowsiness that comes from a long period of quiet, repetitive focus. You pick up your soapstone lamp, the weight of the stone a grounding presence in your hand. The flame is steady, a tiny golden beacon that has guided you through the various territories of the storehouse. As you turn away from the dairy shelves, the shadows of the jars and the cheese wheels stretch out behind you, long and graceful, merging with the larger shadows of the ale barrels and the grain sacks. You move back toward the center of the room, your footsteps a slow, rhythmic heartbeat against the earthen floor. The air in the middle of the storehouse feels slightly warmer, though only by a fraction of a degree. It is thick with the mingled scents of the entire harvest, the salt of the fish, the smoke of the meat, the dust of the grain, the sweetness of the berries, and the rich, earthy tang of the cheese. It is the scent of a life well prepared, a world in balance. You stand there for a moment, simply breathing, letting the atmosphere of the room envelop you completely. Outside, the world is a white void, a place of freezing winds and unending snow. But here, in the heart of the Viking's winter store, there is only warmth, order, and the profound, hypnotic silence of a task well done. You are ready to move to the final checks, your heart as calm and steady as the flame in your lamp. The golden pool of light from your soapstone lamp continues to be your only companion in the thickening silence of the storage room. Having verified the safety of the dairy and the sweetness of the preserved berries, you turn your attention to the center of the room, where a series of heavy, low-slung wooden chests sit directly on the hard-packed earth. These are the salt chests, the most vital repositories in the entire settlement. Without the salt contained within these iron-bound boxes, the abundance of the hams, the fish, and the butter would vanish, lost to the slow, inevitable creep of decay. You walk toward them, your movements slow and heavy, the thick wool of your trousers making a soft, rhythmic swish-up as your legs move through the still air. You reach the first chest. It is a massive thing, hewn from a single ancient oak log that has been hollowed out with patient, grueling labor and reinforced with thick bands of dark, hand-forged iron. The iron is cold, a deep mineral chill that seems to pull the warmth directly from your fingers as you reach out to touch it. You run your hand along the top edge of the chest, feeling the grain of the wood. It is rough and honest, marked by the rhythmic, repetitive strokes of the adze. There are small, circular pits in the iron bands where the hammer of the smith once fell, a frozen record of a long-ago fire and a steady, rhythmic beat. You grasp the heavy iron ring that serves as the handle for the lid. The metal is thick, textured with a fine layer of oxidation that feels like cold sand against your palm. You begin to lift the lid. It is incredibly heavy, a solid slab of oak that resists your efforts for a fraction of a second before yielding. The hinges, oversized and blackened by the forge, let out a slow, agonizingly long creak. Creak. The sound is high-pitched and metallic, cutting through the silence of the room like a single, drawn-out note on a bone flute. It echoes softly against the timber walls, vibrating in the cold air before finally settling back into the quiet. As the lid opens, a new scent fills your nostrils. It is not the smell of food, but the smell of the earth and the sea combined. It is the sharp, clean, mineral scent of salt, a dry, crystalline aroma that seems to clear your senses and sharpen your focus. You set the lid back, resting it against the wall with a dull, heavy thud. You hold your lamp over the open chest. Inside, the salt sits in a massive, shimmering mound. This is the gray sea salt, harvested from the coastal flats during the height of the summer sun. It is not pure white, but a complex, beautiful gray flecked with tiny bits of mineral and the occasional, microscopic fragment of a seashell. You reach into the chest with your bare hand. The salt is cold, a dry, gritty cold that is entirely different from the cold of the sand or the ice. It feels sharp and crystalline, thousands of tiny edges pressing against your skin. You plunge your hand deep into the mound, feeling the resistance of the grains. The sound of your hand moving through the salt is a dry, whispering hiss, a continuous shh that sounds like the wind blowing across a rocky shore. You gather a handful of the salt and lift it into the golden light. The crystals are varied in size. Some are fine as dust, while others are large, translucent cubes that catch the lamp flame and turn it into 1,000 tiny, flickering stars. You slowly open your hand, letting the salt cascade back into the chest. The grains fall in a steady, rhythmic stream, hitting the mound below with a delicate, pattering sound, like the first few drops of a summer rain on a wooden roof. Pit-pat, sshh. You repeat this motion, lost in the simple, hypnotic beauty of the falling crystals. You are checking the salt for any sign of clumping, which would indicate that the deep winter dampness has found a way into the oak. But the salt is dry, loose, and perfect. It flows through your fingers like time itself, a slow, inevitable progression of grains. You spend several minutes simply smoothing the surface of the salt mound with your palm. The texture is abrasive but deeply satisfying, a grounding sensation that connects you to the physical reality of your survival. You move your hand in long, slow arcs, erasing the indentations made by your fingers until the salt is a level, shimmering plane of gray. You then reach for the small wooden scoop that hangs from a peg inside the chest. The scoop is made of birch, the wood pale and smooth, polished by years of contact with the salt. You run your thumb over the bowl of the scoop, feeling the thinness of the wood and the perfection of its curve. You place it neatly on top of the salt, ready for the next time it is needed. With a slow, deliberate effort, you lower the heavy oak lid. You guide it down, your muscles tensing against the weight until it meets the rim of the chest with a final, definitive clack. The sound marks the end of this task, a small, auditory period at the end of a long, quiet sentence. You move to the second chest, which contains the white salt, a more refined, purer salt used for the table and for the most delicate of cures. You repeat the entire process, the lifting of the heavy lid, the metallic creak of the hinges, the inspection of the shimmering mound, the hypnotic cascade of grains through your fingers, and the final, rhythmic smoothing of the surface. Each movement is a duplicate of the last, a loop of domestic maintenance that creates a profound sense of order and calm. Next to the salt chests are a series of smaller, lidded boxes made of woven willow and birch bark. These are the repositories for the dried treasures of the forest floor, the mushrooms and the fungi. You approach these with a light step, your lamp casting dancing shadows across the intricate weaves of the containers. You pick up a birch bark box, its surface cool and papery, smelling of the deep woods and the damp earth. The lid is held in place by a simple loop of leather. You undo the loop, the sound of the leather sliding against the bark a soft, textured whisper. Inside the box are dried porcini mushrooms, their caps shriveled and dark, their stems like weathered bits of wood. You reach in and pick one up. It is incredibly light, nearly weightless, having lost all its moisture to the autumn air. The texture is like old leather, slightly rough and entirely dry. You bring it to your nose and breathe in. The scent is powerful, a concentrated essence of the forest floor, of decaying leaves, damp moss, and the hidden life that thrives in the shadows. It is an earthy, musk-like aroma that is both ancient and deeply comforting. You run your finger over the gills of the mushroom, feeling the delicate, papery ridges that once held the spores of the next generation. You spend a long time with the mushrooms, sorting through them with agonizing slowness. You check for any sign of mold or insects, though the cold of the storehouse makes such things nearly impossible. You move the mushrooms from one side of the box to the other, their dry bodies clicking together with a sound like the rustling of dead leaves in a winter wind. Crinkle-click, crinkle-click. The sound is small and brittle, a sharp contrast to the heavy thuds and groans of the salt chests. You are meticulous, ensuring that every piece of fungus is dry and sound, a quiet steward of the forest's bounty. You replace the lid of the birch bark box and secure the leather loop. You then move to a larger woven willow basket that contains dried seaweed, dulse gathered from the rocky coast during the low tides of spring. The seaweed is dark, almost purple-black, and has been dried into long, leathery strips. You touch the surface of the seaweed, feeling the fine, white coating of natural salt that has crystallized on its surface. The smell here is different. It is the sharp, briny scent of the North Sea, a smell of cold waves and hidden depths. You take a piece of the dulse and bend it slowly between your fingers. It doesn't snap. It is still flexible, holding onto a ghost of the ocean's suppleness. You listen to the sound of the dried fronds rubbing against one another, a soft, leathery rasp that is incredibly soothing. The floor around the baskets is covered in a thin layer of dried pine needles, placed there to provide a cushion and a barrier against the dampness of the earth. As you move, the needles crunch softly under your boots, a sharp, brittle sound that adds another layer to the room's auditory tapestry. Crackle crunch, crackle crunch. You find yourself focusing on the sound, timing your steps to create a steady, rhythmic beat. It is a slow, deliberate dance of survival, a series of small, measured movements in the heart of the winter. You look around the center of the room, taking in the massive oak chests and the delicate woven baskets. They represent the two halves of your world, the heavy, enduring strength of the settlement and the light, fleeting gifts of the wild. Both are necessary. Both are preserved. You feel a deep sense of satisfaction in the way these disparate elements are organized and cared for. There is no chaos here, no uncertainty. There is only the steady, unhurried progression of the seasons and the quiet, repetitive work of the steward. Your arm is beginning to feel the weight of the soapstone lamp again. You lower it, watching the shadows of the chest stretch and grow, reaching out across the earthen floor like the fingers of a sleeping giant. The light flickers as the tallow burns low, the flame dipping and rising in response to some invisible current of air. You reach into your pouch and retrieve a small, thin sliver of fresh tallow. With slow, steady hands, you add it to the pool of liquid fat in the lamp. You watch as the solid white fat begins to melt, its edges softening and turning translucent as it joins the reservoir. The flame brightens, a warm, golden flare that illuminates the room with renewed vigor. The smell of the melting tallow, a rich animal scent, mingles with the salt, the mushrooms, and the seaweed. It is the scent of a room that is alive even in its stillness. You stand in the center of the storehouse, the lamp held steady, and let the peace of the space envelop you. Outside, the snow is still falling, a silent white weight that has transformed the landscape into a featureless void. But in here, every object has a name, a place, and a purpose. You are surrounded by the physical manifestation of your foresight and your labor, and the knowledge is as warm and as comforting as the wool of your cloak. You take a deep, slow breath, feeling the cold, dry air fill your lungs. You are ready for the next section of the room, the next series of small, monotonous tasks that will bring you closer to the end of your inventory. There is no hurry. The winter is long and the storehouse is quiet. You move your lamp in a slow, sweeping arc, watching the light play across the rough-hewn timbers and the moss-chinked walls. Everything is in order. Everything is safe. You are the guardian of the winter, the silent observer of the harvest's rest. You take a step forward, the pine needles crunching softly under your feet, and move toward the far corner where the winter tools and the spare tallow are stored. The rhythm continues, slow and steady, a hypnotic heartbeat in the frozen dark. The renewed flame of your tallow lamp casts a taller, steadier light that stretches toward the furthest, most neglected corners of the storeroom. Having seen to the sustenance and the seasonings, you now turn your attention to the supplies that maintain the light and the tools that facilitate the daily logistics of survival. In the far corner, tucked away behind the massive ale barrels, stands a series of heavy wooden tubs and shelves dedicated to the raw materials of warmth and utility. This corner is the quiet engine of the household's winter comfort. You step toward it, your boots making a slow, deliberate crunch against the layer of pine needles and earth. The sound is dry and grounding, a repetitive rhythm that underscores the profound stillness of the room. The first objects you encounter are the tallow tubs. These are deep, straight-sided vessels made of pine staves, bound with flexible willow withes rather than iron. They contain the bulk of the rendered animal fat, the fuel for your lamps and the base for the salves used to protect skin and leather from the biting frost. You set your lamp down on a small, stable stool nearby, its light pooling around the base of the tubs. You reach out and place your hand on the rim of the first tub. The wood is cold and has a slightly waxy feel, a residue of the many seasons it has served as a container for fat. You lift the heavy, flat wooden lid of the tub. It moves with a slow, frictional scrape, the sound muffled by the density of the wood. As the lid comes away, a very specific, heavy scent fills the air around you. It is a clean, animal smell, rich, dense, and vaguely sweet. It is the smell of stored energy, of the harvest of the herds processed into a stable, life-giving substance. You look down into the tub. The tallow is a solid, opaque mass of creamy white, looking like a captured drift of snow that has been frozen into a permanent state. In the golden light, the surface has a soft, matte sheen, with tiny, swirling patterns where the liquid fat was poured in and allowed to settle months ago. You reach into the tub with a small wooden spatula. The sound of the wood cutting into the cold fat is a soft, muffled thwack, a dense and satisfying noise that suggests the incredible purity of the tallow. You carve out a small sliver, watching as the fat curls away from the blade like a shaving of soft wax. You take the sliver between your thumb and forefinger. It is firm and cold, but as the warmth of your skin touches it, the edges begin to soften almost immediately, turning translucent and slick. You rub the fat into the skin of your palm, a slow, circular motion that is incredibly soothing. The friction creates a tiny amount of heat, and the tallow sinks into the dry, cold, cracked skin of your hand, leaving it supple and protected. You spend several minutes in this state of quiet tactile focus, smoothing the surface of the tallow in the tub back to a level plane. You use the flat of the spatula to press down the ridges, moving in long, rhythmic strokes. Swish, press, slide. The motion is hypnotic, a simple act of tidying that requires no thought but rewards you with a deep sense of order. You are ensuring that no air pockets remain, that the fat is packed tight and safe from the breath of the room. When the surface is once again as smooth as a frozen lake, you replace the lid, guiding it down until it sits perfectly flush with the staves. The sound of the lid settling is a soft, definitive tuh, a tiny punctuation mark in the silence. Above the tallow tubs, a series of narrow shelves hold the materials for the wicks. Here, you find bundles of dried bog cotton, gathered from the marshy edges of the fjord during the late summer. The cotton is white and incredibly soft, looking like miniature clouds caught on thin, wiry stems. You pick up a bundle, the weight of it so negligible that it feels as though you are holding nothing at all. You run your fingers over the fluffy heads of the cotton. The texture is a dry, airy silkiness that contrasts sharply with the heavy, waxy feel of the tallow. You begin to sort through the bundle, selecting the longest, cleanest fibers. The sound of the dried stems rubbing against one another is a microscopic rustle, a sound so faint it is almost a feeling rather than a noise. Whisper, rustle, sigh. You lay the chosen fibers out on the shelf in a neat, parallel row. Your hands move with a practiced, automatic grace, performing a task that has been done by your ancestors for generations. There is a profound comfort in the continuity of this work. Each wick you prepare is a promise of future light, a small defiance against the encroaching darkness of the winter night. Next to the bog cotton are the spools of linen thread, spun from the flax grown in the valley. The thread is a pale, unbleached tan, wound tightly around smooth wooden cores. You pick up a spool and feel its solid, reassuring weight. You run your thumbnail along the surface of the thread, the sound a tiny, sharp zip 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 that echoes in the quiet corner. You are checking for any fraying, any weakness in the fiber, but the linen is strong and well wrought. You place the spool back in its exact position, ensuring it is aligned with the others. The order of the shelf is a visual lullaby, a series of repeating shapes and colors that calms the mind and settles the spirit. On the lower shelf, tucked away in the shadows, is a stack of woodenware, the bowls, trenchers, and spoons that will be needed as the winter progresses, and the household gathers more frequently around the central hearth. These items are made of birch, alder, and maple, their forms simple and functional. You reach for a large, shallow bowl carved from a single piece of burls. The wood is heavy and has a complex, swirling grain that looks like the surface of a stormy sea frozen in time. You take a clean cloth and begin to wipe the bowl, even though it is already spotless. The sound of the fabric dragging over the smooth, polished wood is a soft, continuous shh-shh-shh-shh-shh-shh-shh. It is a rhythmic, meditative action. You follow the curve of the bowl, feeling the subtle indentations where the carver's knife once moved. You can almost feel the presence of the maker in the wood, a ghost of the summer's labor held in the cold of the winter store. You turn the bowl over in your hands, admiring the thickness of the rim and the sturdy, flat base. It is a vessel built to last, a physical manifestation of the settlement's permanence. You repeat this process with the wooden spoons, each one a different shape and size. There are deep, round spoons for stew and flat, wide spoons for skimming cream. You hold each one in the light of your lamp, inspecting the grain and the finish. One spoon has a handle carved with a simple interlacing pattern, a small touch of beauty on a humble tool. You trace the pattern with your fingertip, feeling the tiny grooves and ridges. The tactile sensation is sharp and clear in the cold air. Tick, tick, tick. You stack the spoons in a neat, orderly pile, the wood clicking together with a hollow, musical sound. Clack, clack, clunk. The sound is grounding, a reminder of the physical reality of your world. Having organized the woodenware, you turn your gaze toward the walls of the storehouse. This is the structural heart of your safety. The massive logs are horizontal, their weight pressing down with an ancient, immovable force. Between each log is a line of chinking, dried moss and clay packed tight to keep out the wind. You move your lamp along the seam of the logs, watching the light reveal the texture of the moss. It is a deep, dusty green, looking like a frozen carpet of forest floor. You notice a small area where the moss has loosened slightly, perhaps due to the shifting of the logs in the extreme cold. You reach out and press the moss back into the crevice with your thumb. The moss is dry and slightly springy, yielding to your pressure before settling into a firm, protective layer. The sound of the moss being compressed is a soft, muffled crunch, like the sound of walking on very dry leaves. Crinkle crunch. You follow the line of the seam, checking every inch, your movements slow and deliberate. You are a doctor tending to the skin of your house, ensuring that no draft can penetrate the sanctuary of the store. The cold of the logs is a presence you can feel even without touching them. It radiates from the wood in a steady, silent wave. But as you work, your own body heat, trapped within your layers of wool and sheepskin, creates a small, private climate of warmth. You feel the contrast between the freezing timber and the heat of your own skin, a sensation that makes you feel incredibly alive and secure. You are the warm heart in the center of a frozen world. You move to the corner where the storage of spare leather and rope is kept. These materials are essential for repairs and for securing the sleds that will travel across the frozen fjord. There are rolls of thick, vegetable-tanned cowhide, their surfaces a rich, dark brown. The smell here is intense, the sharp, tannin scent of oak bark mixed with the deep, musky aroma of the leather itself. It is a smell of strength and endurance. You run your hand over the surface of a leather roll, feeling the grain and the firmness of the hide. The leather is cold, but it holds a promise of flexibility once it is warmed by the fire. Next to the leather are coils of hemp and bast rope. The rope is rough and prickly, made of thousands of individual fibers twisted together into a single, powerful cord. You pick up a coil and feel the tension held within the twists. You run your hand along the length of the rope, the fibers catching on the skin of your palm with a tiny, scratchy sound. Scritch, scrape, scritch. You check the knots at the ends of the coils, ensuring they are tight and secure. Everything is in its place. Everything is ready for use. You stand back and look at the tool and supply corner. The tallow is safe. The wicks are prepared. The woodenware is clean and the structure of the room is sound. The monotony of the tasks has brought a profound sense of peace to your mind. The world outside, with its howling winds and blinding snow, seems infinitely far away. In here, there is only the golden light, the smell of fat and wood, and the steady, rhythmic heartbeat of your own existence. You pick up your soapstone lamp, the weight of it familiar and comforting. The flame is steady and bright, a small sun in the dark universe of the storehouse. You begin to move away from the corner, your path illuminated by the warm, golden glow. The shadows of the tubs and the shelves dance on the walls, moving in a slow, graceful ballet as you walk. Every step you take is a continuation of the day's quiet work, a rhythmic progression toward the final completion of your inventory. You stop by the center of the room, looking at the grain sacks and the salt chests once more. The storehouse is full. It is a masterpiece of preparation, a testament to the foresight and the labor of the year. You feel a deep, quiet pride in the abundance that surrounds you. You are not just a manager of food, you are a keeper of life. The responsibility is a weight, but it is a weight that grounds you and gives you purpose. The silence of the room seems to settle over you like a heavy blanket. It is a silence that is not empty, but filled with the presence of all the things you have touched and checked. It is a silence made of salt, grain, meat, and wood. You stand there for a long moment, simply breathing, letting the atmosphere of the room seep into your soul. Outside, the winter continues its long, frozen reign. But in here, there is only the warmth of a task well done and the profound, hypnotic peace of the storehouse. You are ready for the final checks, the last few movements before you return to the heat of the longhouse fire. You take a slow, deep breath, the cold air tasting of pine and tallow, and step forward into the shadows. The steady, amber glow of your tallow lamp remains a faithful companion as you move away from the heavy leather rolls and coiled ropes, turning your attention toward the section of the storehouse where the dried legumes and the milled flour are kept. This area is characterized by a profound, dusty stillness, a silence that seems to absorb even the softest of your movements. The air here is slightly drier, smelling of parched earth and the ghosts of summer fields. Your leather boots continue their slow, rhythmic dialogue with the floor, the sound a series of muffled, grounding thuds that echo softly against the thick pine walls. You move with an intentional lack of haste, savoring the way the flickering light reveals the intricate textures of the woven containers and the heavy linen sacks that line the mid-height shelves. You reach the first of the large, belly-shaped baskets containing the dried field peas. These baskets are marvels of rural craftsmanship, woven from split willow branches that have aged to a deep, honeyed brown. You set your lamp down on a nearby wooden crate, its light catching the weave of the willow and casting a complex lattice of shadows on the floor. You reach out and touch the rim of the basket. The wood is cool and slightly rough, with the occasional tiny splinter that has been smoothed by years of use. You run your hand over the surface, feeling the strength of the weave and the way the willow branches overlap in a continuous, hypnotic pattern. You lift the flat, woven lid of the pea basket. It is light and slightly flexible, making a soft, dry rasping sound as it slides across the rim. Shhh. Inside, the basket is filled nearly to the top with dried green and yellow peas. They are small, hard spheres, looking like thousands of tiny, muted gemstones in the golden light. You reach into the basket, plunging your hand into the cool, dense mass of legumes. The sensation is remarkable, a dry, shifting pressure that flows around your fingers like heavy water. The peas are incredibly smooth, their surfaces polished by the drying process. As you move your hand through the peas, the sound they make is a rhythmic, hollow rattling, a sound that is both percussive and liquid. Click-clack, sure. It is a deep, resonant sound that seems to fill the small space around you. You scoop up a handful of the peas and lift them into the light. They are perfectly dried, their skins taut and unwrinkled. You slowly open your hand, letting the peas cascade back into the basket one by one. Each pea hits the mass below with a tiny, sharp tick, a sound that is lost in the larger, whispering rustle of the shifting pile. You repeat this motion several times, the repetition acting as a further anchor for your focus. There is no urgency, no need to hurry. The peas are safe, the basket is full, and the winter is long. You spend a significant amount of time simply observing the peas, noting the subtle variations in their color, from a pale, dusty sage to a deep, earthy ochre. You find yourself focusing on a single pea that is caught in a small crevice of the willow weave. It is perfectly round, a miniature world of stored energy. You gently dislodge it with your fingernail, the sound a tiny, sharp pop, and watch as it rolls across the surface of the others before disappearing into the mass. The order of the basket is restored. You replace the woven lid, feeling the way it settles onto the rim with a soft, final thud. Next to the field peas are the sacks of broad beans. These are larger, flatter legumes, stored in sacks of the same heavy, unbleached linen you encountered earlier in the grain section. You approach the first sack and kneel down, the thick wool of your trousers pulling tight against your knees. The floor is hard and cold beneath you, a grounding sensation that connects you to the earth. You reach for the leather thong that binds the neck of the bean sack. The leather is dark and stiff, requiring a slow, deliberate application of pressure to loosen. You work the knot with your thumbs, feeling the fibers of the leather resist and then gradually yield. The sound of the leather dragging through the linen is a dry, rasping hiss. Scrape, slide, hush. Once the sack is open, you peel back the heavy folds of fabric. The scent of the broad beans is deeper and more savory than that of the peas, with a faint, dusty sweetness that reminds you of the heat of late August. You reach in and pull out a single bean. It is large, the size of a thumbnail, and has a rich, mahogany color with a dark scar where it was once attached to the pod. The skin is slightly textured, with fine ridges that you can feel with your fingertips. You turn the bean over in the light, admiring its sturdy, functional beauty. It is a humble thing, but in the heart of winter, it is a treasure of immense value. You plunge your hand into the sack of beans, feeling the difference in texture from the peas. The beans are less fluid, their flat shapes creating a more irregular, clinking resistance. The sound is lower in pitch, a series of dull, wooden clacks that echo in the quiet room. You sift through them slowly, checking for any sign of damage or dampness. The beans are cold and hard, a solid, dependable presence in your hand. You spend several minutes in this state of quiet inspection, your mind empty of all thoughts save for the feel of the beans and the sound of their movement. The monotony is a balm, a way of being fully present in the simplest of tasks. You gather the neck of the linen sack and rebind it with the leather thong. You pull the knot tight, feeling the satisfaction of a secure closure. You stand up slowly, your joints letting out a faint, companionable creak that mirrors the sounds of the storehouse itself. You move to the next section of the shelves, where the flour is stored. The flour is kept in massive, rectangular chests made of lime wood, a timber chosen for its lack of scent and its ability to keep the contents fresh. The chests are heavy and imposing, their lids thick and well-fitted. You approach the first chest, which contains the finely milled barley flour. You set your lamp down on the flat top of the chest, its heat warming the wood and releasing a faint, clean scent of the forest. You grasp the iron handle of the lid and lift it with a slow, steady effort. The hinges are silent here, having been well greased with tallow. The lid rises with a soft, airy whoosh, followed by the faint, dusty scent of the flower itself. Inside, the flower looks like a landscape of fallen snow, perfectly flat and undisturbed. It is a pale, creamy white, with a texture so fine it seems to absorb the light of the lamp. You reach into the chest, your fingers sinking into the powder. The sensation is soft and yielding, a dry, velvety coolness that is unlike anything else in the room. The flower clings to your skin, coating your hand in a fine, white dust. You move your hand slowly through the flower, feeling the way it resists and then parts, creating soft, ephemeral waves on the surface. The sound of your hand moving through the flower is a near-silent whisper, a soft, continuous shhhhshhhh that is more felt than heard. You scoop up a small amount and let it sift through your fingers. The flower falls back into the chest in a slow, ethereal cloud, the particles dancing in the golden light before settling back into the mass. It is a hypnotic sight, a miniature storm of dust that moves with an agonizing slowness. You repeat the motion, fascinated by the way the flower behaves, its weightlessness and its infinite softness. You are checking for any clumps, any sign that the cold air has introduced moisture, but the flower is as dry as the desert sands. You take a flat, wooden leveling board that sits on a ledge inside the chest. The board is made of cedar, its surface polished to a glass-like sheen. You use the board to smooth the surface of the flower, moving it in long, rhythmic strokes from one side of the chest to the other. Slide, smooth, slide. The motion is incredibly calming, a way of imposing a perfect, temporary order on the powdery landscape. You watch as the ridges you created with your fingers disappear, replaced by a flat, featureless plane of white. You repeat the strokes until the flower is a perfect mirror of the lime wood lid. You lower the lid of the flower chest, guiding it down until it meets the rim with a soft, muffled thump. The air that is displaced by the lid carries a faint cloud of flower dust, which catches the light of your lamp and swirls in a slow, graceful ballet before vanishing into the shadows. You wipe your hands on your wool trousers, the fabric catching the flower and turning a dusty gray. The sensation of the wool against your skin is warm and grounding. Next to the flower chests are the smaller containers of meal, coarsely ground oats and rye that are used for the thick, hearty porridges of the morning. These are kept in ceramic jars with tight-fitting wooden bungs. You pick up a jar of rye meal and feel its cool, glazed surface. You pull the bung, the sound a short, sharp pop that breaks the silence of the room like a tiny firecracker. Inside, the meal is darker and more textured than the flower, smelling of the earth and the rain. You take a small pinch of the meal and rub it between your fingers, feeling the gritty, honest texture of the grain. It is a reminder of the raw power of the land, captured and held for your survival. You spend a long time in the flour and meal section, moving from container to container with a slow, methodical grace. You check the seals, you smell the contents, you touch the textures. Each movement is a repetition of the one before, a cycle of domestic care that creates a profound sense of security. In this quiet, dusty corner of the storehouse, the world outside does not exist. There is no snow, no wind, no freezing cold. There is only the flour, the meal, the light, and the silence. You notice a very fine layer of flour dust has settled on the shelf next to one of the jars. You reach out and wipe it away with your finger, the sound a tiny, soft shhh. You watch as the dust disappears, leaving the wood clean and dark. The act of tidying, of maintaining the absolute order of the space, brings a deep, quiet satisfaction to your heart. You are the steward of this abundance, the one who ensures that every grain and every legume is cared for and preserved. The cold of the room is a constant presence, a steady pressure against your skin that reminds you of the season. But as you work, you feel a sense of internal warmth, a glow that comes from the knowledge that you are prepared. The storehouse is a fortress against the winter, a sanctuary of life in a world of ice. You feel a slow, heavy wave of drowsiness wash over you, a result of the quiet, repetitive focus and the still, cold air. Your eyelids feel heavy, and your movements become even slower, even more deliberate. You pick up your soapstone lamp, the stone warm and solid in your hand. The flame is a steady, golden teardrop that illuminates the room with a gentle, reassuring light. You begin to move back toward the center of the storehouse, your path a slow, rhythmic progression through the shadows. The shadows of the baskets and the chests dance on the walls, moving in a slow, graceful ballet that mirrors your own movements. You stop for a moment and look back at the legume and flower section. The baskets are closed, the sacks are tied, and the chests are sealed. Everything is in its place. Everything is safe. The order of the storehouse is a visual symphony, a series of repeating shapes and textures that sing of survival and peace. You take a deep, slow breath, the air tasting of dust and cold. You are ready for the next task, the next series of small, monotonous checks that will bring you closer to the end of your inventory. There is no hurry. The winter is long and the storehouse is quiet. You move forward, your boots making a soft, rhythmic crunch on the floor, as you head toward the final corner of the room where the dried fish and the winter candles are stored. The rhythm continues, slow and steady, a hypnotic heartbeat in the frozen dark. The faint, powdery scent of the flower chest lingers in your nostrils as you turn away from the dry, white landscape of the milled grains. You move toward the final, most shadowed quadrant of the storehouse, where the supplies for the winter light and the household's medicinal salves are kept. The air here feels even more still, if such a thing is possible, shielded from the slight drafts of the door by the massive bulk of the ale barrels and the heavy chests of salt. This corner is the quietest heart of the room, a place where the items stored are measured not in pounds or barrels, but in small, precious increments. The length of a wick, the weight of a resin, the thickness of a candle. You approach a low, sturdy table made of thick pine planks, its surface stained by years of spilled wax and tallow. Above the table, suspended from the rafters by a series of thin iron chains, hangs the candle-making rack, often called the candle horse. It is a circular wooden frame with dozens of small, hand-forged hooks protruding from its circumference. Hanging from these hooks are the winter's supply of tallow-dip candles, arranged in neat, concentric circles. These are not the ornate beeswax candles used in the great halls of kings, but the honest, functional light of the Norse household, made from the rendered fat of the autumn slaughter, repeatedly dipped and cooled until they reached the desired thickness. You set your soapstone lamp down on the corner of the table, its golden light washing over the hanging candles. They look like pale, elongated icicles, their surfaces slightly irregular and textured with the marks of the dipping process. You reach out and touch one of the candles. The tallow is cold and firm, possessing a smooth, almost soapy texture that is incredibly satisfying to the touch. You run your fingers down the length of the candle, feeling the subtle ridges where each layer of fat was allowed to cool and harden before the next dip. The candle is a record of time and patience, a physical manifestation of a repetitive, hypnotic labor. You begin a slow, methodical inventory of the candles. You move around the rack, your boots making a soft, rhythmic thud crunch on the earthen floor. You touch each candle in turn, a brief, respectful contact of skin against cold fat. You are checking for any brittleness, any sign that the extreme cold has caused the tallow to crack or pull away from the bog cotton wick. But the candles are perfect, supple enough to be durable, yet hard enough to burn with a slow, steady flame. As you touch them, the candles sway slightly on their hooks, their pale bodies clicking against one another with a very specific muffled sound. It is a soft, rhythmic clack-clink, like the sound of small stones being rolled in a stream but dampened by the softness of the fat. The sound is incredibly soothing, a delicate percussion that echoes in the silence of the storehouse. Click, sway, click. You find yourself mesmerized by the motion of the hanging candles, the way they catch the golden light of your lamp and turn it into a series of dancing, amber highlights. You spend a long time in this state of quiet observation, moving your hand in a slow arc to keep the rack swaying gently. The scent of the tallow here is subtle, mixed with the faint, resinous smell of the pine table and the lingering ghost of the bog cotton wicks. It is the scent of the long nights ahead, of stories told by the hearth, and the quiet comfort of a well-lit home. You reach for a small wooden box on the table which contains the ends, the stubs of candles that have been saved to be melted down and reused. You open the box, the lid sliding with a soft, wooden shhh. Inside, the small, irregular chunks of tallow look like pale pebbles. You run your hand through them, the sound a dry, waxy rustle that is both grounding and peaceful. Next to the candle rack, on a series of small, recessed shelves carved directly into the thick timber of the wall, sit the jars of medicinal salves and dried herbs. These are the treasures of the forest and the meadow, gathered during the short, intense growing season and transformed into potent healers. You approach the shelves, your lamp casting long, swaying shadows that dance across the rough-hewn wood. The jars here are small, made of dark, salt-glazed stoneware or carved from pieces of horn, their mouths sealed with circles of soft leather and linen. You pick up a small stoneware jar, its surface cool and slightly textured. This jar contains the forest salve, a mixture of rendered bear fat, beeswax, and the resin of the Norway spruce. You undo the leather binding, the sound of the sinew cord sliding against the stoneware a tiny, sharp whisper. As the seal is broken, a powerful, intoxicating scent fills the air. It is the smell of the deep, ancient forest, the sharp, balsamic tang of the resin, the sweet, floral scent of the beeswax, and the heavy, earthy base of the animal fat. It is a smell that promises healing, protection, and the enduring strength of the trees. You take a small wooden spatula and lift a tiny amount of the salve. It is a deep, translucent amber, looking like a captured drop of autumn sun. You rub a small amount into the back of your hand. The heat of your skin causes the resin to soften, releasing even more of its pungent, comforting aroma. The salve feels thick and protective, a barrier against the biting wind and the drying cold. You spend several minutes smoothing the salve into your skin, your movements slow and circular, your mind fully focused on the tactile sensation and the scent. Slide, rub, smooth. The monotony of the action is a meditation, a way of connecting with the natural world even in the heart of winter. You replace the leather seal and the sinew cord, ensuring the jar is perfectly protected. You then move to the jars of dried roots, the valerian for sleep, the yarrow for wounds, and the willow bark for the fevers of the deep winter. You pick up a horn jar of dried yarrow. The horn is translucent, allowing the light of your lamp to pass through and illuminate the contents in a soft, honeyed glow. You shake the jar gently. The dried leaves and flowers inside make a soft, papery rattle, a sound like the rustling of dry grass in a summer breeze. Shhhhhshhhh. You listen to the sound, imagining the sunny hillside where the yarrow was gathered, the hum of the bees, and the warmth of the sun. In the cold of the storehouse, the memory is a powerful comfort. Tucked into the very corner of the room, resting on a bed of dry straw, is a small, hand-hewn sledge. This is the indoor sledge, used for moving heavy barrels or sacks of grain within the settlement when the snow is too deep for larger carts. It is made of ash, the wood pale and strong, its runners polished to a mirror-like sheen. You approach the sledge and kneel beside it, the straw crunching softly under your knees. Crackle crunch. The sound is sharp and brittle, a reminder of the dry fields of the past. You reach out and touch the runners of the sledge. They are freezing, a solid mineral cold that seems to vibrate with the potential for movement. You notice that the wood of the runners is looking a bit dry, having been affected by the low humidity of the storehouse. From a small pouch at your belt, you retrieve a clean rag and a small jar of linseed oil. You open the oil jar, the scent of the pressed seeds, earthy, nutty, and rich, mingling with the smells of tallow and resin. You dip the rag into the oil and begin to apply it to the wooden runners. The sound of the rag sliding over the smooth ash is a soft, continuous hiss, a rhythmic, repetitive noise that fills the quiet corner. Slide, hiss, slide. You move the rag in long, sweeping strokes, watching as the dry wood drinks in the oil, its color deepening to a rich, golden tan. The grain of the ash becomes visible, a complex pattern of lines and whorls that tells the story of the tree's growth. You follow the grain with your eyes and your hand, your movements slow and deliberate. You spend a long time oiling the sledge, moving from the runners to the cross struts and the handle. You are meticulous, ensuring that every inch of the wood is protected and nourished. The process is deeply satisfying, a way of maintaining the tools that sustain your life. The scent of the linseed oil becomes more pronounced, a warm, domestic smell that contrasts with the wilder scents of the forest salves. You find yourself focusing on a small knot in the wood of the handle. It is a dark, swirling eye of grain, a point of density and strength. You rub the oil into the knot, your thumb moving in a slow, circular motion, feeling the texture of the wood change from dry and rough to smooth and supple. Once the sledge is thoroughly oiled, you set the rag and the oil jar aside. You stand up slowly, your joints letting out a faint, companionable creak. You look at the sledge, its golden wood gleaming in the light of your lamp. It looks ready for work, a silent partner in the logistics of your survival. You then turn back to the candle rack and the apothecary shelves. The inventory of the storehouse is nearly complete. Every item has been touched, checked, and cared for. You feel a profound sense of peace, a deep, quiet satisfaction that permeates your entire being. The storehouse is not just a room full of food and supplies. It is a manifestation of your foresight, your labor, and your connection to the rhythms of the earth. In here, everything is in its place. Everything is preserved. Everything is safe. The order of the room is a visual and tactile symphony, a series of repeating patterns and textures that sing of survival and peace. The cold of the room is a constant presence, a steady pressure against your skin that reminds you of the season. But as you work, you feel a sense of internal warmth, a glow that comes from the knowledge that you are prepared. The storehouse is a fortress against the winter, a sanctuary of life in a world of ice. You feel a slow, heavy wave of drowsiness wash over you, a result of the quiet, repetitive focus and the still, cold air. Your eyelids feel heavy, and your movements become even slower, even more deliberate. You pick up your soapstone lamp, the stone warm and solid in your hand. The flame is a steady, golden teardrop that illuminates the room with a gentle, reassuring light. You begin to move back toward the center of the storehouse, your path a slow, rhythmic progression through the shadows. The shadows of the hanging candles and the small jars dance on the walls, moving in a slow, graceful ballet that mirrors your own movements. You stop by the center of the room, looking at the entire space. The hams, the fish, the grain, the salt, the dairy, the ale, the flour, the tools, the light. The storehouse is full. It is a masterpiece of preparation. You take a deep, slow breath, the air tasting of resin, oil, and cold. You are ready for the final check, the last few moments before you blow out the lamp and return to the warmth of the longhouse. There is no hurry. The winter is long and the storehouse is quiet. You move forward, your boots making a soft, rhythmic crunch on the floor, toward the heavy oak door. The rhythm continues, slow and steady, a hypnotic heartbeat in the frozen dark. You stand for a final, long moment in the very center of the storehouse, the small tallow lamp held steady in your hand. The golden light reaches out, brushing against the edges of the grain sacks, the heavy oak barrels, and the dark, hanging shapes of the cured meats. This is the culmination of your work, a silent sanctuary of survival that you have meticulously organized and verified. The air is perfectly still, a preserving medium that holds the sense of salt, smoke, grain, and cold wood in a delicate, unchanging balance. You take a slow, deep breath, feeling the crisp dryness of the air in your lungs, and let it out in a long, soft plume of white vapor. The task is finished. The inventory is complete. Every jar is sealed, every sack is tied, and every barrel is full. You begin your slow progression toward the heavy oak door. Each step is deliberate, your boots making a soft, rhythmic thud crunch against the earthen floor and the scattered pine needles. The sound is muffled and grounding, a repetitive beat that marks the end of your quiet labor. As you move, the shadows of the storehouse shift and sway, dancing along the rough-hewn timber walls and the moss-backed crevices. The golden light of your lamp follows you, a warm, protective aura that pushes back the deep, ancient shadows of the corners. You pass the salt chests, their iron bands gleaming faintly, and the sand bins where the root vegetables sleep in their cold, dry beds. Everything remains in a state of profound, hypnotic order. You reach the heavy door, a massive construction of thick, adze-hewn planks reinforced with blackened iron straps. You set your soapstone lamp down on a small, waist-high ledge near the frame, its light pooling around the base of the door. The wood of the door is old and incredibly dense, its grain raised and weathered by generations of winters. You reach out and touch the surface of the wood. It is shockingly cold, a solid, unyielding barrier between the warmth of the interior and the freezing void of the outside world. You run your fingertips over the grain, feeling the ridges and the tiny, frozen pores of the oak. It feels like touching the skin of a dormant giant. Your hand moves to the iron latch, a heavy, forged mechanism that has secured this room for decades. The metal is freezing, a sharp, mineral chill that bites through your skin, yet it feels reassuringly strong. You trace the shape of the iron ring, feeling the texture of the forge scale and the small, rounded rivets that hold it in place. The iron is dark and honest, a material that knows only strength and endurance. You spend several minutes simply standing there, your hand resting on the cold iron, listening to the absolute silence of the room. There is no sound from the outside, no wind, no movement, no life. There is only the steady, rhythmic heartbeat of your own existence and the faint, almost imperceptible hiss of the burning tallow lamp. It is time to extinguish the light. You lean over the soapstone bowl, your face close to the tiny, flickering flame. The warmth of the lamp is a gentle contrast to the cold of the door. You look at the pool of liquid tallow, clear and still, and the charred tip of the bog cotton wick. With a slow, steady breath, you blow. The flame wavers, stretches into a thin blue line, and then vanishes. A small, curling ribbon of white smoke rises from the wick, carrying the rich, earthy scent of rendered fat and charred cotton. The room is instantly plunged into a deep, velvety darkness, broken only by the thin, silvery lines of moonlight filtering through the microscopic gaps in the door frame. In the darkness, the sense of the storehouse seemed to intensify. The salt, the smoke, the grain, and the cold would become more vivid, more tangible. You stand in the silence for a long moment, allowing your eyes to adjust to the gloom. The room feels larger now, a vast, echoing chamber of preservation. You reach for the iron latch and pull. The mechanism moves with a slow, heavy click, followed by the deep, resonant groan of the iron hinges. Creak. The sound is long and drawn out, a metallic protest that echoes in the stillness of the night. You push the door open, and the world outside rushes in to meet you. The air is startlingly cold, a sharp, crystalline pressure that freezes the moisture in your nostrils and makes your skin tingle. The settlement is buried in a deep, pristine blanket of snow, the white expanse shimmering under the light of a pale winter moon. The fjord is a vast, flat mirror of ice, reflecting the star-studded sky. There is no wind, no sound, no movement. The world has been turned into a masterpiece of white and silver, a landscape of absolute, frozen peace. You step out onto the threshold, your boots meeting the fresh powder with a deep, satisfying crunch. Crunch, crunch. You pull the heavy door shut behind you, the wood-on-wood thud sounding like a final, definitive period at the end of the day's work. You turn the iron key in the lock, the mechanism moving with a solid, metallic clack. The storehouse is sealed. The life of the household is safe behind these thick, timbered walls, protected from the winter's bite by your foresight and your labor. The walk back to the longhouse is short, but it feels like a journey through a dream. Your footsteps are the only sound in the world, a rhythmic, hypnotic beat in the silence of the night. You look back at the storehouse, its turf-covered roof blending into the snowy slope of the hill. It looks like a natural feature of the landscape, a quiet, slumbering mound of earth and wood. You feel a deep, quiet pride in the building and the treasures it holds. You are the guardian of the winter, and your work is done. You reach the heavy door of the longhouse and push it open. A wave of warmth and golden light washes over you, carrying the sense of wood smoke, roasting meat, and the sweet, fermented tang of ale. The contrast is overwhelming and deeply comforting. You step inside, the heat of the central hearth fire wrapping around you like a heavy woolen blanket. The air is thick and hazy with smoke, the flickering light of the fire casting long, dancing shadows across the carved pillars and the straw-covered floor. You move slowly toward the hearth, your movements heavy and unhurried. You begin to shed your layers of winter gear, a repetitive domestic ritual that marks the transition from work to rest. You untie the sheepskin cloak, the leather thongs stiff with frost. You pull the heavy wool tunic over your head, the fabric scratching softly against your skin. You sit on a low, fur-covered bench near the fire and pull off your boots. Your feet are cold, but the warmth of the hearth stones begins to seep into them immediately. A dull, pleasant ache of returning circulation. You lean back against the carved wooden backrest of the bench, your eyes fixed on the embers of the fire. The wood, thick logs of oak and pine, is glowing a deep, pulsing red with occasional flickers of blue and orange flame dancing along the surface. The sound of the fire is a soft, continuous crackle, a rhythmic, hypnotic noise that fills the room. Snap, pop, hiss. It is a sound of safety, of warmth, and of life. You watch the smoke rise in slow, graceful spirals toward the opening in the roof, disappearing into the cold, dark night. A deep, heavy wave of drowsiness washes over you, a result of the long day of quiet focus and the sudden transition to the heat of the fire. Your eyelids feel weighted and your limbs feel like lead. The world beyond the longhouse walls, the snow, the ice, the freezing wind, seems infinitely far away, a distant memory that has no power over you. In here, there is only the warmth, the light, and the profound peace of a task well done. You are surrounded by the sense of your home, the physical manifestation of your community and your survival. You reach for a small cup of warm mead that has been left for you near the hearth. The ceramic is warm against your palm, and the scent of honey and spices rises to meet you. You take a slow, deliberate sip, the liquid spreading a gentle, internal warmth through your chest and stomach. It is sweet, rich, and deeply satisfying. You set the cup down and close your eyes, letting the sounds and smells of the longhouse envelop you completely. The rhythmic breathing of the others in the house, the soft rustle of the straw, the steady crackle of the fire, all of these sounds merge into a single hypnotic lullaby. You feel yourself drifting, sliding toward the edge of sleep. There are no worries, no thoughts of the future, no lingering tasks. The storehouse is full. The winter is respected. The home is warm. You are safe. Your head drops slightly, and your breathing becomes slow and rhythmic, matching the steady pulse of the glowing embers. The heat of the fire is a constant, gentle pressure against your skin, a reminder of the life that continues even in the heart of the frozen dark. You are a part of this rhythm, a part of the season, a part of the earth. You surrender to the heaviness, to the peace, and to the deep, dreamless sleep that follows the work of the guardian. The fire continues to pulse, the shadows continue to dance, and the snow continues to fall in absolute silence outside the thick wooden walls. But you are no longer aware of the world. You are held in the warm, safe embrace of the winter night, resting in the knowledge that everything is in its place, everything is preserved, and everything is exactly as it should be. The end.